Taylor Zhou has worked in government, non-profits, startups, and commercial real estate. Her work and story centers around creating a better understanding of Asians in America, and as a passionate advocate for the AAPI community, Taylor has helped to establish the Manhattan Chinatown Business Improvement District, is self-published on Medium, and her work has also been published in the Village Sun, World Journal, Korea Daily, and International Examiner. Thank you so much, Taylor, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, thank you.
So to start, could you tell me a little bit more about your life and your work?
I want to talk about my connection in terms of the to the Manhattan Chinatown. My grandfather came to the U.S., I think, following World War II. He had family here, and over time, he became the president of a fraternal organization that was founded in the 1800s to fight the Chinese Exclusion Act and to fight discrimination in the US. It was considered, the organization, it has multiple chapters. The oldest and most well-known is in San Francisco. And the chapter in New York was formed in 1880, was incorporated in 1883, 1 year following the Chinese Exclusion Act. It was, at that time, the first self-help organization for immigrants in the country. It was where they turned to for any difficulties they faced: employment, housing, settling disputes amongst themselves. It was really the center of town life, city life. The organization, I think in San Francisco, I think it's called the Chinese Six Company. And I think in New York, it's called the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. It was considered, the head of that organization is considered the mayor of Chinatown. And the building, it's the neighborhood city hall. So my grandfather was the head of that organization. It helped with small businesses as well. I mean, that was the lifeblood, I think, of many immigrant neighborhoods, the small businesses. The first small business in New York was established in the 1850s by the South Street Seaport, which is a few blocks away from the Manhattan Chinatown. It was a grocery store that sold candy and cigars. I think it was a natural location because it was close. It was where the sailors came in off, by the seaport, and where they needed to shop. So I feel very much that I continued in this tradition by helping to form the Manhattan Chinatown Business Improvement District, because it is chambers of commerce are very popular in the rest of the country, but in New York City, that the business improvement districts, or BIDs, are much more prevalent and yes, much more prevalent. And it is a way for property owners, small business owners, to gather, unite collectively to solve some of the issues in the neighborhood. So in those, let's say, for example, in the winter, you would, instead of each one going out to their sidewalk to sweep or to shovel snow, there would be a collective of workers who would go out and do that for everyone, sharing resources. So, and the same workers could help with neighborhood trees and maintenance, and of course, sanitation and security is the basis for those organizations. It was I learned after working to help form the bid that the concept came from a Chinese Canadian, Alex Ling. It became so popular and so successful that idea and that organization proliferated in Canada. I think there may be over 40 in Canada today. And he was given an award by, I think, the Queen of England for, I guess, civic life or citizenship. And I think that's something that's so little known. I only found that out. I thought I was helping to advance my grandfather's or desire or his responsibility. I had no idea that it would go to it would connect with early immigrants in other countries in Canada. So I'm so proud. I mean, I'm just so proud and so thrilled that I was able to participate in that formation process. I mean, you have no idea. I feel like the legacy of that and oh my gosh, I'm getting a little emotional. And to see that how much an organization like that is needed in a pandemic when there were so few resources. I think it just affirmed to me. Not only am I proud that it was able to form, but to have it. There's nothing like a global pandemic to show you what is needed and what isn't, and to have that to have that foundation for the community. Just I'm really it's another one of those things that I can look back in my life and feel a lot of gratitude and pride. So, and wherever he is, I didn't expect to be emotional. I'm sorry. Wherever he is, I hope he's looking back, looking down on this, and that he's proud too. So that's my connection to New York City and to growing up here. I learned so much more from my article with Corky Lee when I attended the conference, and he told me that some of the transcontinental workers may have been from the Hakka clan, and as you may be aware, China has lots of regions, lots of dialects, lots of different. It's very, very diverse, contrary to popular opinion. And he told me when I met him that the Hakka clan, which is my clan and my ancestors, are believed to be among the transcontinental workers that built the railroads, and the same workers may have built after they completed that job, they also built the Stanford campus, and wow, I mean, if I had known that in school, in college, I undoubtedly, even if I were not accepted, I would have applied. I mean, there is something to be said to walk in a place, and I'm sure African Americans may feel the same way looking at the historic buildings in DC that were built by the slaves. I also learned I attended at New York University for 7 years, undergrad and grad. And I only found out perhaps a year or so ago that the early Chinese immigrants and civic organizations were located in that area in Greenwich Village, and they protested against the Chinese Exclusion Act at Cooper Union, which is a famous architecture school. And it's kind of sad to me that I learned these things about, my heritage so late in my life. I guess we all have this curiosity. I think when people do those DNA searches and ancestry searches, I think we all have this curiosity about our forebears and what their lives were like. And, so I think it led me to this journey, which is just incredible. I never could have, this is not imagined this, that it would lead me down this path. So that's my connection to New York City, to my schools, to Chinatown.
Yeah. So what was your experience like growing up in New York City and attending school in New York City?
I live in a very immigrant or neighborhood. Well, it became very immigrant. I live in an Irish neighborhood. I'm by the New York Botanical Garden, which was built by the Irish. And once that project was completed, they settled in the area. So, but I think in the 80s, I think a lot of immigrants move into the area, and slowly over time it transformed. I think today there are a lot more Latinos, Mexicans, Southeast Asians, and it's become much more, while the Irish bars, and maybe it's not maybe it's a stereotype, but there were a lot of bars in my neighborhood. And after they closed, the Irish population started to move away to perhaps the suburbs, and now I live in a very very mixed, very diverse neighborhood, and I like it. I think because we all bring our tradition, our food, our culture to it, and it to me it enhances my life. I can go to my Southeast Asian's grocery store and have jasmine rice, basmati rice, buy turmeric or cumin, and try different cuisines and practice in my kitchen. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you face any challenges embracing your identity and heritage as you were growing up?
When probably in high school, I think those were the teenage years that everyone went through. I have my parents were my father's college educated. He went to one of the best universities in China. My mother is a teacher. My grandmother is a school teacher, and I live in a household that love books, love reading, love history, and I think I have that grounding that not many people have. And I also live in a very, as I said earlier, in a very diverse neighborhood. So I didn't feel, yes, it was not, certainly I didn't see representation. I mean, there's Bruce Lee, but that's one figure and it's incomplete. But I realized that I do have a grounding that not many people have. But in my teenage years, I think I struggled, like on top of the teenage angst, I struggle with, like, am I American enough? Am I that identity when you're between worlds? I think I certainly struggle with that, or trying to find my way. But I think behind it always that that foundation that my parents gave me, and I now that I'm older, I always think, we can't solve all the world's problems, but if you give your children a foundation, like a self-esteem. I mean, they have a journey of their own. We all have a journey of our own. But if you have that foundation, you will, even if you find yourself lost, you will find yourself on the path. There is stability or grounding that they can always come back to. It's like maybe a philosophy book. It's a guidepost. You will struggle with life. I mean, that is human existence, but there's something for you to always come back to and feel that you are grounded in some way. And I think I was given that, or I certainly searched for it, but I was also given that through my parents.
Was writing quite an important part of your life during those early years? Or I guess when did you discover writing?
I would have to say that reading was much more of my uh, hobby. I I only began to focus on it in recent years in light of what was happening to in terms of my work. Um, I was doing demographic research on Asian uh, demographic research, also because of I was looking into genealogy, and I discovered when I became aware of certain very disturbing trends. I think as I outlined in the Asian Mystique, I knew that many people were not aware of it, because many cities, the articles were, and their crime stats actually were showing that the country was doing well. Like crimes were trending down in major cities. It seemed, things were okay or doing well. But what was disturbing to me was that when I saw crimes against Asians, or Asian enclaves, in particular the Chinatowns, they were escalating. They were going against trend. So overall health of a city was fine, but trends in Seattle, many examples. New York, Grace Meng, the congresswoman, wrote a letter to NYPD, the New York Police Department, pointing this out. Why is crime in the city purportedly going down, but crimes against Asians in all categories was trending up? This happened in Seattle. And then we saw in the news that these robberies, burglaries, assaults in the South, also making those videos on security cameras going viral. And then it occurred to me that something was happening, and I wanted to raise the alarm. And that's when I began to write. Or I wanted to let people know, or to raise awareness that something was happening.
Yeah, you've published multiple articles over the last year. What was your experience like living in New York City during the pandemic?
I think in the beginning, I felt I knew something, or I felt that something bad was going to happen, because I felt the fear. This was in the early stages, and where the Chinatowns or Asian neighborhoods were being emptied out naturally, even without official shutdowns. So I knew, combined with the stats that I was coming across, I didn't have a good feeling about what was happening or what was about to come. I think maybe around March or February, Google News, Google Data published a very stark chart about the number of mentions of COVID in the news. And it was, by that time, it was only the first or second month into it was very early in the process, and there were already like 1.1 billion mentions in the news. So that was, yeah, that was a little, that was astonishing to me, that I didn't think much of it. But I had just instinctually felt that something was headed in our way, or something was happening. I did I went on a media summit, a junket, to try to bring attention to the issue. I'm not sure that people, they were very polite about it, but I'm not sure that they fully appreciated the gravity of the situation. But I think, as we discussed before the interview, I was fortunate enough to work with an outdoors group, and that really gave me a measure of, it was a great distraction. I knew that things were not always not well, but it allowed me to redirect that energy to something better, perhaps, in a very difficult situation. And I think we know today that I think the group AAPI data reported in March of this year that they believe that up to 2 million hate incidents happen in the US based on reported incidents. So they probably extrapolated that information based on the population and other things. So I think a lot of things happen that were not reported, that don't make the news. I mean, things still continue to happen. The mother that recently, the man who was a canner in New York, who was violently beaten. I don't even want to know if he survived. I mean, because it's just one incident after another of the same very, very violent attacks. Yeah. So I think what I went through is small potatoes compared to some of the incidents that were reported and what's happened to people. But I'm happy that I did what I could to raise awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also have the website Miss Zhou. Could you tell me a little bit about that project or that work that you do?
Oh, I was looking to at that time, I think I was looking to start a small business during the pandemic. Actually, before the pandemic, a few months before the pandemic, I thought I set up a website. I have all this work experience and life experience. I thought it would be helpful to someone or something. I certainly felt it useful to have some sort of voice out there for a community that has so little representation. So that's how I have come to set that up. And of course, there are lots of photos of Asian American history that I was never taught, that most of us were never taught, and that I'm immensely proud of their achievements. They inspire me so much. They give me strength. I mean, certainly they live in a much more difficult time. It is astonishing to me how they have accomplished things 100 years ago, or 50 to 100 years ago, that we have not been able to do today. I just wonder about that. How is it that our ancestors who came here during a much more like difficult time, much more, discrimination and racism, outright explicit, and they were able to accomplish so much more. I mean, I have a page on the women pilots, like Hazel Ying, who just, she paid for her flight lessons when she knew no one, would hire her or accept her. Or that the doctors in the Midwest who built up this practice that was able to heal people that Western medicine at that time couldn't. And then when he passed, this is like the third or fifth generation now, but when he passed, all the town officials and the townspeople that he helped turn up for one of the biggest funerals in the town's history. Those things are so remarkable. History is far more complex than we're taught today. It's much more nuanced. But most of all, I think I feel when you ask me about growing up and struggling with the identity, I think of the people, the young people, perhaps without the grounding I have, or without knowledge of the Asian American history that I've come to learn myself, how lost they must be. You were in this society that, I love Bruce Lee. I think he is without a doubt a trailblazer, and he brings so much pride. But one actor, one person isn't able to provide that. We are far more complex than that. Our history shows us that there are many more trailblazers than we've ever been taught in our school. And I like that generation to know. I think what the author Iris Chang, who wrote The Rape of Nanking, what she said, I saw an interview with her, and she said, we are not, she said, for young people who feel like they're not American enough, she said, no, you are American. The fusion is the American. You are Chinese American. That is as American as you can be, because the history of this country is that fusion. We're just not taught that. And you don't have to choose, because you can bring the best of both worlds in. I think that was the first. It's sad that it's only after she passed that I saw that, because how many other kids could benefit from hearing a woman as accomplished as Iris say that you can be the best of many worlds, that people can't I don't remember her exact words, but the spirit of what she said I remember. And I think a lot more Asian kids or immigrant kids need to hear that, because because you're put in a position where you feel that you have to choose. Oh, am I Chinese? Am I American? You're foot in both worlds. But the fact that you are part of this and part of that, whatever your heritage may be, is very American, because there cannot be someone, an Italian American is not an Italian in Italy. He or she, that person, is something that only America produced. That hybrid, right? That mix of heritage. They can go back to Italy and be proud of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, but they are not fully that either. They are something else. They are made into something else when they come to this country. And you think that is the same for many, many immigrants or ethnic groups. So I want...
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on as well what you've just mentioned about the portrayal and representation of Chinese Americans, and maybe discuss as well how that links into your article, The Asian Mystique. Could you explain that article and what inspired you to write the piece?
Oh, it came about because of the mass shooting in Atlanta. I I read some of the comments online, and I thought that they were just, people said things like it has nothing to do with race because the killer, um, got Joseph something, I forgot his name. There were two white Caucasians that were killed in the shooting, so it was not racially motivated. And there were I felt to me, a lot of incomplete explanations or uninformed opinions. And well, he did go to an Asian massage parlor that had Caucasians, but his target was Asian. He actually said that. Oh no, he said it wasn't racial. So I would beg to differ. If you're going to an Asian massage parlor, and why is there this negative connotation with massage parlors? I mean, I go to so-called massage parlors to get massages. And why is there assumption that because it's a massage parlor that it's illicit? I don't doubt that there are illicit massage parlors, but there are also legitimate businesses. I mean, I go to those spas to get massages, and they are legitimate businesses. So the assumption, there's an automatic insinuation or stereotype. I think it was afterwards that we realized that some of the women were like, mothers, working mothers who were in a legitimate business trying to, it's a hard job and just trying to raise their family. It wasn't, and there's no, I think the police said or afterwards that they did not find any illicit activity associated with those locations. So be that as it may, there are legitimate businesses and there are illegitimate businesses as well. It's not, I don't like that it's automatically inferred that it's illegal. Okay, it's a malicious innuendo for people who may work very hard at their job. And which brings me to Sheridan Prasso's book, which is that in some ways, Asian women in portrayal, if you remember the work of Susie Wong, that was the pretty woman of her day. She was a prostitute that William Holden met in Hong Kong. So it's not, so Asian women, combined with history, perhaps the military, US military going overseas and patronizing the brothels, there's some tie there, and there's some, there's gender, ethnicity that's connected with it. So to automatically say, oh, it's not racially, then why did you go to a massage parlor, and why did you mention sex addiction? Right? Those are, and I think taking that out of context with history and what Sheridan said, which is most fetishes, women fetishes are Asian. She said by far, more than any other group online. So those factors have to be taken into consideration. I think to just say, oh, it's not racially motivated because there were two Caucasians killed is I think to me, is a very myopic way of seeing things. So the Asian Mystique, I think refers to that in the stereotypes are still very much alive and well. I mean, it's inevitable. If we're portrayed a certain way, if we're not seen a certain way. And by the way, I'm not sure if people know this, and I recently found this, Asian women in the US, Asian American women are far more educated than white men. I was shocked to read that. I mean, like, really? How is it that we don't know that? then if that is indeed the case, why don't we see more Asian women in senior positions, in leadership positions? If Asians also dominate the best schools in this country, why are they also not in senior positions? That's a very curious thing. So that's the Asian Mystique 2021.
Yeah, and what are some of the core messages that you are hoping to convey through the piece?
That our perception impacts how people perceive us, and representation and impacts how we're treated. Asian Mystique 2021, you can probably take that back 50 years, or perhaps even 100 years, arguably. And there are similar themes. We did the movie Pretty Women in the 90s, and then you realize, oh wow, the world Susie Wong. That was just an Asian woman in the same story. So I guess it's been updated, but we love prostitutes in Hollywood.
Yeah, how have these representations, but also in conjunction with the public tragedies and recent events, impacted you as an Asian American woman?
I mentioned that the summer before COVID, the shutdown, someone threw while at a crosswalk, someone in a van threw a water bottle at me, and at that time, I thought, oh, what an idiot! Maybe he was aiming for the trash can, possibly. And then when COVID happened, I realized that I think he was aiming at me. I just wasn't, I think I had my head down. I was looking at the phone. I was at the crosswalk, and all of a sudden I was like, ouch. And I looked up, and this guy just like in the van. Because apparently this happened to a professor, a Korean professor. She's a pharmacist, and she teaches at one of the local SUNY city or state universities. I think I mentioned in the article that on the way home, the two men also threw something at her. I forgot what it was. Yoji Kim, I think I mentioned that in the Medium article. I think and this happened a few months before COVID. So on hindsight, I'm sure something was building in the culture that they may have, I don't know, things in the media may have incentivized that behavior. I don't know him. He was a stranger to me. Why throw a water bottle or throw anything at me? So that happened. But there are worse things have happened to other people. The Kathy Chen, who was urinated on in the subway, which is just horrendous to me. Horrendous. And there are, as of March, I think, or April, there were 6,000, perhaps, I think, incidents reported to Stop AAPI hate, and those are a select few of these horrible things, and not to mention seniors and children. Before COVID, I saw there was a video on social media where an elderly Asian man walking with a cane he was on an empty street, and this big buff young man was taunting him, calling him names, go back to China. That was the most friendly line, and it was captured by the security camera. And because he was on a cane and frail, he could not escape or walk away from that. So he had to endure that, walking very slowly while this young man was hurling those kind of horrific words to him. And it reminded me that my father, one year, when I was walking with him on the street, accompanying him, he was walking with a cane, and he was also walking very slowly. And a man behind him said, why are you so slow? Why don't you walk faster? Or something like that, in a really hateful way. And I was startled. I turned around and I said to him, can't you see he's walking with a cane? The sidewalk is freaking 15 feet wide. You are a young man. You could not have just walked around him. So I knew this was, I think, a few years before COVID. I knew that something was very wrong, that something in the culture, something was very wrong, what people can come up to, like, frail, vulnerable seniors and act that way. I mean, it's like it takes these kind of incidents to remind you that it's not isolated. Something has been building up over time. I mean, I'm so glad that nothing else happened to that man, the elderly man that happened in Canada. But I'm sure those incidents don't rise to the level of hate crimes because, hate speech, at least in the US, is protected. But they are horrific in terms of what it says is happening in the society and in the culture, that is happening. I look at that. I mean, he wouldn't report it likely because he is a senior and he's old, and those are the things that I'm more perhaps afraid of. I'm so glad that people are coming, reporting these attacks and assaults, but I think of the 2 million that AAPI data estimated that has gone unnoticed, unsaid. That's only captured by security cameras.
Yeah, and I'd like to go back a little bit more to your article again. And in the work, you also mention Sheridan Prasso's theory about the kind of dangerous intersection between the fetishization of Asian women and the rising violence and hate crimes. How dangerous do you think this representation of Asian women in the media is?
Well, I mean, the group Stop AAPI Hate found that Asian women are nearly 2.5 times more likely to report assaults. So I think it can be, under certain conditions, it can be very bad. And there are news right now today. I just heard today that when US troops leave Afghanistan, there's concern about the women there. They were afforded some measure of protection. But when the Taliban retake territories, I mean, the brutality is horrific. I certainly, I worry about what's happening to us in these countries. I mean, Vancouver was ranked, I don't know, I haven't seen it myself, but it has apparently ranked with the highest anti-Asian hate crimes in the world. I didn't read it. I don't know the source of that information, but I heard it on the news. So it is disturbing, and that's where the Meng Wanzhou, I'm sure, case is happening right now. I believe it. I mean, for many years, the in particular the Asians or the Chinese, let me just say that, have been buying, the very wealthy ones have buying real estate, and it's driven up, I'm told, the real estate prices in Vancouver, and that causes this resentment. You're a foreigner, you contributed nothing to this country. You're here, you're buying up real estate, making it unaffordable for us, and you've done nothing to build this country, which is effing lie if you study American history. That is so, which is why I think Asian American study needs to be taught, because the combination of being the perpetual foreigner and not contributing and being rich on top of that, the resentment that it instills in people, is particularly when they're going through a very difficult time, produces this kind of result. I mean, I remember an article mentioned that, all the Chinese are buying up real estate in the major cities and driving prices. And then I read the stats, like Asian buyers or overseas buyers, as a group, are less than 10% of the home buyers. So then, if that is indeed, if those facts and data is accurate, then why why all this volume of news and volume of coverage that makes the home ownership so seemingly feel like it's a takeover, an invasion? If it's less than 10%, if overseas buyers represent less than 10% of all home buyers, then why? It's a very distorted coverage, because it's a completely, yes, they are buying homes, but without giving context as to the number of people who are buying, what percentage that is out of, of what number. And the same, I remember there was a whole big story about how Russian women were coming into in Miami and buying up these homes. And then when you look into other articles, it's like 100 of them. Okay, are you telling me we are as a country under some sort of a dire emergency because 100 wealthy Russian women choose to make America their home, choose to buy homes here, choose to invest in businesses here, choose to have their children grow up here? You mean 100 of these women are so deadly? I mean, okay, if you don't like it, that's something else, but where's the balance in that reporting?
Yeah, what would you like to see in the media when it comes to the portrayal and representation of the AAPI community?
I think the fairness that everyone deserves, that you write about things, that you do some basic research on the subject matter. And that, I think that speaks to the collapse of the journalism schools. I think Columbia University, it's not Columbia, it's endless articles or research studies have shown that newsrooms are overwhelmingly homogeneous, and that they are not able they're not informed themselves in a way that they have not the qualifications, perhaps to even write some of these articles. And I mean, I've heard that newsrooms, because of social media, in some ways are on life support. I hear for local papers, they're on life support. The pay is low as well, so people in the industry are, fresh-faced college kid is not going to maybe the kind of skills that a good journalist requires decades, right, of experience and sharpening. So if you're fresh out of school and you know very little and the history is not taught to you, and you're kind of struggling with jobs available, and you're struggling with okay salaries, you don't know whether this industry is going to survive. Yes, this is the kind of result we're going to get. So I mean, sometimes the articles, I think, can be better researched, but I think it goes back to that. You don't know what you don't know. You won't even research things that you don't even know, that if there's more than just the surface. You know, if you think that if you only report on articles, stories where, you know, rich Asians come and buy up the real estate and get them lots of these rich Asian articles about their Maseratis, you know, trust fund kids in Canada, you know, banging up their car, their $1 million car against the tree. That's, it's sensational and it's kind of, you know, it's fun. I mean, I get it, but if over and over that's the story, you can imagine the resentment and anger. You come to our city, our town, you take up our housing, you wreck our neighborhood, it is unaffordable for us. I mean, what else, how else would you expect people to feel? There's no love. I don't even love people like that. Yeah, so that kind of representation, but I don't know how they can, how do you, if newsrooms are that homogeneous, how do you, and it's a dying industry, how do you attract different voices? And how do these journalists even make an effort? Do they even have the time and the resources to even make an effort to do deeper research on their topics? I mean, the solutions are pretty simple, but I think, you know, the money and the resources available just isn't there. It's, I'm not saying anything that 10 other research organizations haven't said.
What are some of the lessons you hope we have learned during the pandemic about the AAPI community and how they're viewed and treated?
I would say that how marginalized they are. It takes a pandemic to expose those fault lines. I think if the AAPI community, I would say, well, New York, but also nationwide, receives very, very little funding. I think public and private sectors of funding sources, they receive less than 1%. And those kinds of inequities become, you know, it's obvious. No pantry, no shelter, limited shelter, nonprofits not having the resources to manage the volume, not having the resources to even hire staff, much less qualified staff, all those things. And then, of course, if they're under-resourced, then there's just, you know, there's no safety net for them to help themselves, or there's limited safety net for them to help themselves. I think the takeaway is that well, things are not what they appear to be pre-COVID. It never was. I think we just didn't listen to the alarms raised by, you know, various institutions and studies. I mean, it's not a secret that AAPI organizations are funded. I mean, I've heard that it's been said over and over again in meetings. It's not new. If your community is not given, you know, 0.5% over decades, it shows. It's obvious. I guess, you know, it's yeah. I think, but we probably lift at that, clear that veil, clear the cobwebs because of the pandemic. That's not to say, you know, they're not rich and successful, but that's rich and successful in many, many groups. That's not something that's uniquely Asian. They're, you know, across all nationalities, ethnicities, there are successful, wealthy people. We're just saying that that is not the only, not the only Asians. You know, there are like 1.23 billion Indians, 1.2 billion Chinese. What, you know?
Do you think there will be positive changes going forward from the pandemic about how the AAPI community is treated and viewed?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. It's hard to say. I mean, change is very, very slow. It could be imperceptible, you know. Um, I don't know. That's the hope, right?
Thank you so much, Taylor, for sharing your story and
Mhm.
experiences during the pandemic, for discussing your work, your views about the representation of the AAPI community in the media, and also more specifically, the portrayal of Asian women. Also, thank you for your contribution to MOCA and taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I want to thank Mocha too for just undertaking this. They also did the same following September 11 and the impact on the community. It's important. It's our history as well, and I thank them for undertaking this effort and recording this. It's much needed and appreciated by me.